Hello and welcome back to my quadcopter lair. Today we're going to take an in-depth look of replacing the antenna on the Taranis. I'm going to replace it with a removable 5 dBi antenna. Will give me a little more range over the stock 2 dBi. The reason I took on this task is because the other day when I was flying, I landed my quad and I was standing by the pickup, laid my controller in the case, and I didn't realize it, but I had my antenna pointed straight up like this right here. And you can imagine what happened next. So I went back and picked up my quad, and the lid fell down, and I didn't realize it. And when I came back to the pickup, I just smashed it the rest of the way down. Of course, as soon as I did it, I realized what I'd done. But not only did it break it, but it smashed it almost in two. It's really thin. Get the camera to focus right there. But anyway, I'm going to show how to get into this and resolder a removable antenna on. Okay, before we get started, I'm going to show you everything you're going to need to do this project. The first thing I want to point out is you need to really have some decent soldering skills, because you are going to be soldering a very small button that gets soldered on back to where the original antenna was soldered to, because the new antenna gets plugged into a little button, I guess you could call it. It's not soldered on like the original. Well, the first thing that I have here is, and in case you're new at soldering, some of the things that I had to learn is you have a couple of different kind of fluxes. You have acid core flux, and then you have rosin core flux. And at first I didn't realize the difference between the two, but there is a big difference. Definitely don't want to use acid core solder or acid core flux when doing electronics. That is more for radiators or brass pipe and stuff like that you'd normally solder. So anytime you're doing electrical work, you definitely want to get some acid core solder. I picked this up from Radio Shack. It was $8. And then, two, you want to definitely get some rosin core solder, and this is 60% tin and 40% lead. This is really good. I get it, this particular kind I get at AutoZone. It's like $2.50. And you'll need a relatively small tip soldering iron. This is I got from Radio Shack as well. It's a 40 watt. I think I gave $13 for it. It's been really good. I have been through 3 tips and about 10 deals of these with this soldering iron, and so far it's still going strong. The next thing you get, and I will post a link in the bottom about where I got the antenna and the little connectors here that you need. The antenna, I believe, if I can remember right, with shipping and everything, it was $12 or $15, and I got this from Amazon. And if you look right here, this is the small little connector. If I can get the camera to focus on that, probably not. A small little connector that these button into. There we go, turn it around so you can see it buttons into that. So it's very, very small, that what we're going to be soldering. So I want to definitely say, if you do this, just be aware that we need to be really good at soldering. I'm not even sure I can do it, but we're going to try it. I got these off of eBay. I think I got these 5 for $6 or something like that. It was, yeah, I think it was less, eight something the time I got shipping on them. The next thing is a razor blade, a screwdriver, a hot gun, or a hot air gun, or a butane torch. The original antenna is going to be hot glued to the board, so we'll need something to kind of soften the glue up to get it off. And then, of course, a hot glue gun. But anyway, we'll get right to it and start taking it apart and get busy. Okay, I got the screws out, and before we pull this apart, what you're going to want to do, and what I did, is I took these needle nose pliers and I had put some heat shrink on them, because what we need to do is reach up here and back these nuts off right here on these switches. Just back them off, and I did that so, of course, it wouldn't mar it up. That way, when we go to separate this, we leave the switches on the front side of the case. And the reason for that is because that's where the wires are connected at. So once we pull that apart, it'll leave the switches behind. And then the only thing we'll have to do, if you wanted, is to remove these ribbon connectors here. But I'm thinking maybe I could probably pull this off without breaking the connections on it. So as we turn this around, you can see right here where the super glued is. See if I can get the camera there on it. And that is where the what we're going to have to heat up just a little bit with the hot gun, and so we can get that hot glue off of there and desolder that. So I'm going to get set up and do that, and we'll be right back. Okay, here we're back. That hot glue that they used, I'm definitely going to have to call them and find out what they used, because that was some sticky stuff. Normally when I put hot glue on, I can't get it to stick very well, but that stuck really well. It had to fight with it a little bit. So what we're going to do now first is I'm going to go ahead and unsolder the old antenna from it. Sorry I can't zoom in anymore. I cannot get my camera to want to focus any closer of a zoom than that. So we're just going to go ahead and touch this here, get this wire off. Just like that. Okay, and then I'm going to, you might also go ahead and pick you up some of this desoldering brad right here that I've got. Because I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to clean some of this excess solder off, and so that way I can go ahead and put some extra or some clean on. Go ahead and when you do this, I found that it helps that you put a little bit of solder on your tip before you put it, because it transfer heats a lot better when you have a little bit of solder on the tip of your iron. So we'll go ahead and touch it down here so we can suck some of that off. Close it right there. Okay, it looks pretty good. It's got a little bit of hot glue left. I couldn't quite get it all off with that wire in the way. So I will probably heat this up just a little bit more and see if I can rub some more of the excess of that off. But you can kind of see what we're dealing with is we have the two ground spots here, and then the little signal wire is right there. I don't know if you can see that or not. It's right here. So I'm going to go ahead and clean this up a little bit more, and we'll be right back. Okay, and we're back. A little more heat with my finger, and I just wiped it off, and then I took some lighter fluid, this stuff here that you put like in a Zippo. I find that does really good removing residue. I put a little bit on a paper towel, just wiped across, and it came right off. So the next thing we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and get this other antenna out of the way. And what you'll need to do is just press on the inside here. See if I can get this in the shot so you can see it. Right here. You just press that kind of together. Like this. I might just grab my pliers if it makes it a little easier. Well, come on, being stubborn. There we go. Popped it right out. And you just slide this out, and you're left with just the hole. Okay, so next up we're going to go ahead and solder this little deal on. And let me tell you, this thing is really little bitty. Let me go ahead and pull one of these out of here. And I definitely recommend getting more than one. I would get 2 or 3. I went ahead and got 5 because these things are so small. And a word of warning, the first thing I did when I got these is I went ahead and plugged it in here to make sure, before I soldered it on, that it fit this. Well, when I did that, I destroyed it getting it off of this. So, I assure you when I post the link on here that the ones that I bought off eBay and the ones I bought off of Amazon here, this antenna, they fit each other. So, I didn't expect it to stick that well, but I destroyed it in pieces trying to get it back out of the little socket here on that. Go ahead and pull this back, dump one out. Okay, now when I say small, I mean this thing is little bitty. I don't know if I can get the camera to focus on that, but that thing is a little small. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip this over, and I hope that you're able to see all of this. But describing it to you, perhaps you'll be able to see. Whoop. set this back up here on my finger so we can see it. Okay, so when we get this flipped over, I don't know if we can see it. We get the putting it upon my hand. Maybe that'll work a little better. Move the light a little bit. Let's see if we can get this where we can see it. I'm gonna hope that you can see it there. I'm having trouble on my screen seeing it. Get it to focus. Well, anyway, it's a little square deal, and on each one of these sides right here, get this, whatever this is, out of the palm of my hand out of the way. Okay, on each side of this deal is where you're going to solder it on the ground side, and then out here on the tip of this, I sure wish I can get the camera to focus so we can see this. I may take a picture of up close picture of it. So that you can see what I'm talking about. But out here on the other end is the little place that you soldered goes to the center of the wire, the little plug-in. So you got the ground on both sides, and then you got the signal wire that runs right through the center. And when you see it, you can see the brass running across there, or the gold, or whatever they make this out of. So when we flip this back over, this one here is the spot that you solder for the signal wire in here, and then the outside being the ground for that. Okay, so I'll go ahead and lay this bring the controller back over here. Get this in the shot, and I apologize. I wish I could zoom in a little closer so you can see exactly what I'm doing. Okay, so now the first thing I'm going to do, or what I did, is I went in and took this desoldering brad here, and I went in and pulled all the solder off these pads, because as I found out, laying this little button plug on that with a little bit of solder on it, not setting level, kind of gave me some issues. So I pulled all the solder off that I could, and then I'm going to touch up the 3 pads with a little bit of flux. And then I'm also going to do the 3 pins that we're going to solder to on the button plug here. Okay, and then I have some tweezers that I'm going to use to grab hold of this and set it down. Okay, now when we set this down here, the thing I'm going to suggest that you do, I know this is really hard to see it, but down here on the bottom is where your signal pin goes, and there's not much of a pin to solder to, so you got to be really careful not to touch this side of the ring with a solder, because I'm afraid if you do that, then your antenna plug won't snap onto it. So when you do this, I would set it up here and try to put that plug just on the very top edge of that pad to give you plenty of room to touch this pad and flow the solder onto the pin of that button plug there. That way you don't actually physically have to touch the button plug at all with a soldering iron. So if we can get this straightened up here. This is definitely a bigger, a harder project to solder on than what I thought. I consider myself a decent solderer, but when it comes to little bitty things like this, it is definitely a challenge to get this set just right. Okay, I think I'm pretty happy with that. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and solder one side right here on, because those pads, or the ears on the side of this, is a little bit bigger than that. So I'm going to see if I can touch the solder there, and then touch the solder on this side, and then we'll touch the solder again in the center there. Get this piece of junk out of the way right here. Okay. Alright, so I'm going to take a little bit of solder and put it on into my tip, just a little bitty bit. Like that. Okay, and then I'm going to take my screwdriver that I have right here, and I'm going to try very delicately to come in here and rest it on top of this button plug. Just like this. Shift it around, I figured. Get X-Acto knife here, see if I can help straighten this up. See, we might try to do it with a knife here. It might be a little better, a little easier. Sure, straighten up again. Okay. Alright, right there. Make sure I got my iron turned the right way with the solder that's on it. Oop, now move the button plug. This is definitely tricky. So we can get this lined back up again. Try one more thing here, see if we can do this with the tweezers. It might be a little easier to... I think the tweezers is going to be the way to do it. If I can see what I'm doing. Make sure my plug is lined up. Okay, I'm going to hit that about that fast is all it's going to take. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead. A little bit more solder, not too much. Knock some of that off. I want just a wee bit on there. Just back in the shot. Okay. Alright, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in. I'm going to touch the signal plug wire right here. Pad. You'll be very careful not to touch your ring there because it got the flux on there. That solder would flow right to it instantly. Okay, touch that again. I need just a little bit more solder. Tip of that. Okay. Alright, here we go. Gonna touch that right there. Maybe we need a little more flux. I'm not getting it to flow out really good. There we go. Turn my solder the right direction. There we go. I believe that's it. And then we'll go ahead and solder the other side on. Right there. Now I'm going to call that done. All that finagle. So the first thing I'm going to do before I do anything else is I'm going to go ahead and plug in my battery. Plug this back up. And by the way, this was really easy to pull these out. You just had to pull these down and that ribbon just come right out of there real easy. I didn't want to have to fight with it, but it was definitely worth doing to get it out of your way. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and plug this back in and put the battery in it and make sure that we're not still getting our antenna alarm. Okay, I plugged everything back in, put the battery in it, and I confirmed that I didn't have my antenna to defective alarm anymore. So I went ahead and hot glued the connector in. I think this is a little excessive, but I wanted to be sure I had plenty of hot glue in here. So the first thing I would recommend when you go to put this in is make sure I move the there's the part down here that you hold on to, and then this is a little nut that threads on right here. Make sure that that pin right there, make sure we get this in the shot. Make sure that this little pin is in the center. Get it in the shot here. Here we go. Make sure this pin is protruded out just a little bit. When I first stuck this in here, this white part back in here was flush with this. So I had to screw the antenna on and push all that down, and it pulled the pin into the antenna. So what I did is I screwed the antenna on this way, and then I ran this nut up to the bottom of the antenna right here. So I make sure when I screw this in that I had the antenna fully seated inside the connector there. And so what that did for me is when I stuck this in here, I left this flush, and I left the rest of it sticking out here. And then I filled this whole cavity inside here with hot glue, and I ran it out to the sides here to kind of help support it. And then once I got that in there, I had a little bit of a room around this nut here that I squeezed some glue in there and kind of fixed it in with my finger. I was really worried about this breaking loose, the hot glue breaking loose inside there, because basically the hot glue is the only thing holding that in there. I'm not really sure what else I could have done. We probably could have. I would have had to come up with some other way of screwing that in there, but I'm going to try this first and see how it works. The only other thing I did is I just hot glued a couple of spots so that wire wouldn't be flapping around inside there, and then I snapped the deal on there. So we'll go ahead and screw the antenna on here. And it's really cold right now. It's about 30 degrees outside. So as soon as I got this hot glued, I took it outside and set it on my front porch for about 30 minutes and got that hot glue good and solid, so I didn't have to worry about it. And you'll notice as I wiggle this, I was coming to surprise that hot glue is actually holding pretty good. I'm flexing the plastic instead of the hot glue. So definitely turned out better than what I could have hoped for. So far it seems to be pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and button this thing back up, and then we'll take one more last look at it after I get it back together. Okay, we're back. Got it all put back together. And real quickly, I'm going to demonstrate what happens when you do have an antenna, a problem. My heart sank when I turned my controller on after I smashed the antenna in the case, and not knowing exactly what was going on at first, but this is what happens.
Welcome to Taranis. Attitude mode.
And as you can see,
0 volts. Radio antenna defective.
it obviously tells you that you have a problem. Of course, we don't have our antenna installed on right at the moment, so that's why we're getting the message. So we're just going to go ahead, real quick, just kind of give you a comparison in the two antennas. There are the two antennas right there, the difference in the size, so you get an idea exactly what the difference is. We'll go ahead and install this. We'll turn the Taranis back on.
Welcome to Taranis. Attitude mode.
And as you can see, we don't have an antenna warning anymore. So I hope you found this helpful in knowing exactly what's entailed in doing this. I think the hardest part of this whole project was actually lining up the pin to touch it with the solder. But anyway, I hope that this helps you in deciding whether or not you want to accomplish this task or not. I'm definitely eager to see what my range is going to be like now. But anyway, I hope this helps you, and until next time.